Okay, so I want you to picture a man at the absolute peak. I'm not talking about the guy who's just good at his job. I mean, a man who defines his entire existence by his ability to conquer gravity.
Literally.
Literally. He's a mountain climber. He's on top of the world, physically, metaphorically. The adrenaline is just a constant state for him. He is the master of his domain. And then, in a split second, snap.
Gravity wins.
Gravity wins hard. I mean, we are talking about a fall that, by any stretch of the imagination, should have just ended him. It's a 45-foot drop onto a jagged ledge.
Which is bad enough.
It's already a disaster. But then he bounces off that and rolls another 200 feet down the mountain.
Think about that distance. That is almost the length of a football field, just tumbling end over end. By all the laws of physics, of biology, this man should be dead.
Instead, he wakes up. He wakes up in a hospital bed, and he can't feel his legs.
And that, right there, is where the real horror story begins.
Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we are looking at something that, on the surface, you might dismiss. We're covering Come Lie With Me by Linda Howard.
And you hear that title, you see the cover, you think, okay, romance novel. But what we're really doing today is dissecting a brutal case study in trauma.
It's about the physiology of paralysis, sure, but it's more about the sheer, unbelievable force of will that it takes to rehabilitate a human spirit.
A human spirit that has decided quite firmly, I'm done. I want to die.
It's so interesting you put it that way, because my first impression was exactly that. Paperback romance, maybe some witty banter, but the medical detail, the psychological accuracy, especially in the first half of this book, it's intense.
It is. We're really looking at this classic dynamic, the immovable object versus the unstoppable force.
And what's our mission for this deep dive? It feels like we're exploring more than just a story.
We are. We're exploring the intersection of physical therapy and psychological warfare. Because that's what this is. It is not gentle nursing. It's not holding hands and patting someone on the back.
It's a combat zone.
It's a combat zone. And the battlefield is a man's body, but maybe more importantly, his ego. We're going to look at how a shared trauma can create this bond that just it completely transcends the professional patient-therapist relationship.
And that healing the healer dynamic, too. That's a huge part of this.
A massive part. So let's get into it. Let's set up that battlefield. Segment 1. The unmovable object and the unstoppable force.
Our unmovable object is Blake Remington. And before we can even talk about the accident, we have to understand who this guy was.
Yes. The before picture is critical. The source material calls him a Renaissance man.
Which can be kind of a cheesy term, a guy who can paint a little and do some math.
Totally. But for Blake, it means something very specific. It means physical dominance in every single element. He wasn't just an engineer.
He was a test pilot for top secret government planes, right?
Exactly. The kind of job where you're pushing the absolute limits of physics and your own body. One mistake, and you are a memory. And that's just his 9 to 5.
Right, because on the weekend, he's a world-class yacht racer.
And a mountain climber. His identity isn't, I am smart or I am kind. His identity is fundamentally, I am capable. He is a man of action.
Psychologically, what does that do to a person when your whole self-worth is tied up in your physical ability?
Well, it's what some might call identity foreclosure. Your entire sense of self is just wrapped up in this one specific capability. So for Blake, it's, I can do things others can't. He's the one who fixes the problem. He's the leader. He's the provider of safety, of solutions.
The alpha.
The ultimate alpha.
Yeah.
And then he falls. So now, let's look at the after picture. We are 2 years post-accident. What does Blake Remington look like now?
It is bleak. I mean, the source material just paints this incredibly dark picture. He's paralyzed from the waist down. That's the obvious part. But it's the atrophy that really got to me. He's lost 50 pounds.
50 pounds of muscle. That's not fat.
Yeah.
That is the physical manifestation of his power just wasting away.
And it's a symptom, right? The physical decay is just mirroring the psychological decay.
Precisely. He's in a house in Phoenix, but he lives in one room. The curtains are always drawn. It's dark. He refuses to eat properly. He hardly sleeps. And the text is very clear on this. He is actively willing himself to die.
That phrase is just, it's chilling. Willing himself to die. It's not an active suicide attempt.
No, it's a slow-motion suicide by neglect, by apathy.
Why? Why give up so completely? He's rich. He has a family who loves him. Why? Just stop.
It's the perfectionism trap. For a man like Blake, who only ever operated at 100%, a life at 50%, or even 90%, it isn't just a lesser life. It's an insult. It's a humiliation.
So in his mind, it's all or nothing.
It's a totally binary worldview. I am
Yeah.
either a god or I am garbage.
All right.
There is no middle ground where he's just a man with a disability. So if he can't be the alpha, he'd rather be nothing at all.
Okay, so he's in the dark, wasting away, the immovable object. Now enter the unstoppable force.
Enter Dione Kelley.
And she's a physical therapist, but the source makes it very clear she is not your average PT. She's not here to fluff your pillows.
No, Dione is the nuclear option. She is who you call when the patient has quit, when everyone else has given up. She has this reputation for handling, and I'm quoting here, uncooperative patients.
Which is a massive understatement for Blake.
A huge understatement. So Richard Dillon, who's Blake's VP and his brother-in-law, he has to track her down. He finds her in Panama City, Florida, where she's trying to take a much-needed break.
And she doesn't want the job. She turns him down flat. I'm tired, I'm burned out, I need a break. She's trying to escape exactly this kind of emotional drain.
But then Richard pulls out the file. And this is such a key moment.
The file.
He shows her the medical records first, the x-rays of shattered bones, the reports detailing all the pins and plates holding Blake's body together. It's a complete mess.
It's a horror show.
But then he shows her a photograph, a picture of the before Blake. The text describes him with laughing blue eyes and a captivating dimple. She sees the man he was, the vitality that has been lost.
So is it just, a physical attraction? She sees a hot guy and thinks, I can fix him?
I think it's deeper than that. The source material notes that Dione thrives on testing herself. She is drawn to the impossible challenge. She looks at that picture and sees a catastrophic waste of human potential.
So it's a professional check.
It's professional pride, but I also think there's a bit of projection happening. She sees something beautiful that was broken, and she has this deep, almost compulsive need to restore order, to fix it. So she takes the job. But she has one condition.
Total control.
Total, absolute control. No interference.
Which brings us to their first meeting, and I love this scene. The atmosphere is just dripping with hostility.
You can feel it. You have Blake in his cave. It's dark. The air is stagnant. It probably smells like despair.
And in walks Dione, dressed in all white.
The symbolism is not subtle, but man, it works. She is the light invading his darkness. The text describes her with these distinct cat's eyes, golden or amber and jet black hair. She just radiates life.
And Blake reacts like a vampire seeing the sun for the first time. He hates her on sight.
He tells her to get out. He's rude, he's dismissive, he throws every insult he can think of at her.
Now, most people in that situation, a normal caregiver, would try to de-escalate. I'm so sorry, sir, I'm just here to help.
Dione does the exact opposite.
She goes on the attack.
She goes nuclear. And this is a very specific, if risky, therapeutic strategy. She correctly identifies that Blake is drowning in apathy. And apathy is the absolute enemy of rehabilitation.
You can't work with I don't care.
You can't. You need energy. Any energy. So she decides to manufacture some. She decides to make him angry.
Because anger is fuel.
Anger is high-octane fuel. It's a mobilizing emotion. It gets the heart rate up. It floods the body with adrenaline. It makes you want to do something, even if that something is just yelling.
So she goes right for the jugular, right for his ego.
She insults his physical state. She calls him a 98-pound weakling. And then she delivers that killer line. She tells him he would lose a fight with a noodle.
I mean, that is just savage. You're saying that to a man who used to fly experimental jets.
It's calculated cruelty. She's deliberately stripping away his sick person shield. Usually, we treat sick people with kid gloves. We whisper. We're gentle. By insulting him, she's treating him like a combatant. She's acknowledging that he's still a man, even if she's saying he's a pathetically weak one.
And it works. He absolutely explodes. He calls her a bitch.
And she smiles. Because now she has something to work with. She tells the staff later, I can use anger. Anger is actionable. Apathy is a tomb.
This confrontation immediately leads to the arm wrestling bet, which is just such a pivotal moment for establishing the power dynamic in the house.
It's brilliant. She lays down the gauntlet. If I win, I stay, and you do everything I say. If you win, I walk out that door right now and you never see me again.
And Blake, he looks at her. She's a woman. She's slender in his eyes. And his bruised ego thinks, easy win.
It's pure biological arrogance. He's still operating on the software from 2 years ago, the software that says male automatically beats female.
Yeah.
He completely ignores the reality of his physical condition.
Let's break down the biomechanics of this for a second. Why does she win so decisively?
Well, there are two main reasons. First, and most obviously, atrophy is devastatingly real. If you don't use it, you lose it. His muscles, his ligaments, even the neurological pathways that recruit muscle fibers, they're all dormant. He has no power.
And the second reason.
She's a professional. Dione's entire job involves lifting and manipulating human bodies, often dead weight. She knows leverage. She knows how to lock her wrist, how to engage her shoulder and back. She reveals later that she's a weightlifter. It's a necessary part of her job.
So he's bringing ego to the fight, and she's bringing technique and actual functional strength.
Exactly. So they lock hands. The text describes him trying to just power through, trying to tap into this reserve of strength he thinks he still has. And he just hits a wall.
You can just imagine the shock on his face.
It must have been incredible. He pushes, and she doesn't move an inch. And then slowly, deliberately, she forces his hand down to the arm of the wheelchair.
It is the ultimate humiliation for a man like Blake. It shatters the last of his delusions. He can no longer pretend he's just resting or recovering. He has to face the cold, hard fact that he is physically weaker than this woman he sees as a nuisance.
And this is the key,
Yeah.
it doesn't crush him completely. It doesn't send him back under the covers.
He demands a rematch.
That's the spark. That's the alpha waking up from his coma. He sets a goal. It's a petty goal, a goal born of revenge, but it's a future-oriented thought for the first time in 2 years. I will beat her next time.
That is the first real step of rehabilitation.
It is. The fight is on.
So Dione has won the first battle. She secured her position. And that brings us to segment 2, which I call the grind, because she does not let up for a single second.
No, she runs that house like a boot camp. The core principle here is that routine is rehabilitation. When you're depressed, time just becomes this amorphous blob. Days bleed into nights. There's no structure.
Dione creates rigid, unforgiving structure, and it starts early.
5:30 a.m.
5:30. And she doesn't knock politely. She comes in, throws open the curtains to let the sun blast in, and rips the covers right off of him.
It's another dominance move, but it's also clinical. Blake is intensely embarrassed. He's in his pajamas. His legs are wasted. He feels completely exposed and powerless.
And Dione just ignores his shame.
She forces him to confront his own body. By seeing him exposed every single morning and reacting with total clinical detachment, she's desensitizing him. She's non-verbally saying, this is your reality now. Look at it. We are going to deal with it.
And after that morning ritual, we get to the breakfast wars. And I want to spend a minute here because, on the surface, it's a funny scene about a guy who really wants a waffle.
But underneath, it's a massive psychological struggle for control.
The battle of the grapefruit.
Exactly. Think about it from Blake's perspective. He controls nothing. He can't walk, he can't drive, he can't go to work. The only power a prisoner or a patient often feels they have is over what they will or will not put in their mouth.
He wants a blueberry waffle. He wants comfort food. He wants that little hit of sugar and dopamine.
And Dione brings him a tray with half a grapefruit on it.
And 19 vitamin pills. 19. What on earth is in those pills?
It's an aggressive nutritional protocol.
Yeah.
She's trying to rebuild this system that's been neglected for 2 years. So you're talking calcium, magnesium for the muscle cramps, B vitamins for nerve function, high-potency protein supplements. She's force-feeding his body the building blocks it needs.
But to Blake, looking at that bitter grapefruit and a handful of pills, it feels like punishment.
It feels like she's deliberately denying him the one tiny pleasure he has left in his life. So he reacts like a cornered animal.
He goes nuclear again. He picks up the tray and he throws it at her.
He literally throws his breakfast across the room. And this is the moment where Dione wins the war. Most people would scream. They would get angry. They would probably quit right there.
Dione just ducks. She laughs a little. And then she calmly signals to Alberta, the cook.
And Alberta is the unsung hero of this whole operation.
She absolutely is. Alberta just walks in, completely unfazed, holding a second tray.
An identical second tray. Same grapefruit. Same 19 pills. Same glass of milk, which Blake hates.
That is such a profound power move. It communicates without a single word. Your tantrum has no currency here. You can throw trays all day long. We have more trays.
It completely removes his leverage. It creates a situation where the only way out is through. He realizes he cannot bully or intimidate or manipulate his way out of this regimen.
So he eats the grapefruit.
He chokes it down. He drinks the milk. He submits to the discipline. And once he submits to the diet, he submits to the gym.
And the gym is pure torture. The source material is very graphic about this. It's not a triumphant montage. It talks about the excruciating cramps, the sweat, the muscle spasms as his nerves try to fire again.
It is grueling, painful work. And Dione is right there in the dirt with him. She's massaging his atrophied legs to keep the blood flowing, which is both intimate and agonizing for him. She's pushing him through the pain.
And she lifts weights alongside him. That felt important.
It's critical. By working out with him, she's not just a therapist anymore. She's a competitor. She turns rehabilitation into a competition, and she knows his ego can't stand to be outworked.
Now, we have to talk about the support cast here. We mentioned Alberta, but there's also Angela, the housekeeper, and Miguel, the handyman who helps lift him. They all switch sides so quickly.
They were loyal to Blake, but they switched their allegiance to Dione.
Why?
Because they're truly Team Blake. They love him, and they have been watching him rot for 2 solid years. They see that what Dione is doing, as brutal as it looks, is actually working. They see a spark in him for the first time.
So they're willing to conspire against his comfort to save his life.
Exactly. But there is one person in the house who fights Dione tooth and nail.
His sister Serena.
Serena is the classic antagonist in a recovery story. She is the enabler.
The source describes her as constantly hovering. She calls Dione a gypsy. She's always trying to interrupt the therapy sessions because she can't stand to see Blake in pain.
Serena loves him desperately, but her love has become toxic. You have to remember their backstory. Their parents died young, and Blake basically raised her. He is her entire world, her protector.
So him being helpless, it makes him dependent on her.
Subconsciously, yes. If he's in that wheelchair, he's safe, he's home, he's not climbing mountains or flying dangerous jets. She prefers him helpless because it guarantees he won't leave her or die.
And Dione sees this immediately.
Sees it and she shuts it down. She eventually has to ban Serena from the house during therapy hours. She basically has to put a restraining order on the sister's suffocating love.
So Dione has established this intense physical grind. But the real breakthrough, the thing that changes the entire dynamic, happens in segment 3. It happens in the quiet moments. It happens at night.
The nighttime dynamics are fascinating. During the day, it's all sweat and yelling and competition. It's loud. But at night, the house is quiet, the defenses are down. Dione has to come into his room every few hours to turn him in his sleep so he doesn't get bed sores.
It's an incredibly intimate act.
It is. And it's in these quiet, dark moments that the relationship starts to shift. Blake begins to get curious about her.
He starts noticing that she's as much a prisoner in this house as he is. She never leaves. She has no friends calling, no family visits. She's just there, like a sentinel.
He starts to pick at her armor. He's having a particularly bad day, a moment of deep self-pity, questioning if a life with a limp is even worth living. And he challenges her. He basically dares her to show him her own weakness, her own scars. He sees her as this perfect, unbreakable robot.
And she cracks. She tells him her story, and
Yeah.
wow, it is heavy.
It's devastating. We find out that Dione is the illegitimate child of an alcoholic mother, and she wasn't just neglected, she was actively emotionally abused. She tells him this horrifying story about being locked in a dark closet on his 7th birthday.
Just imagine that, being 7 years old alone in the dark on your birthday.
And her mother's voice was the soundtrack to her childhood, repeating this mantra: "You're just a bastard, and nobody loves a bastard."
That's the script that's running in her head her whole life.
It is. She ended up living on the streets by the time she was 10. She was raised in orphanages. It was a life of pure survival.
What does hearing this do to Blake?
It's like a splash of ice water in his face.
Oh.
It snaps him out of his narcissism.
Yeah.
Because deep depression can be very narcissistic. You become convinced that your pain is the biggest, most important pain in the world.
He gets perspective.
He gets major perspective. He hears her story and realizes her toughness isn't arrogance, it's armor. It's a survival mechanism forged in fire. And he respects that. He stops seeing her as his nurse and starts seeing her as a fellow soldier who survived a completely different and maybe even worse war. He stops asking questions, but the text notes he doubles his effort in the gym the next day.
But there's a layer to her trauma that she doesn't tell, at least not out loud. But the listener, the reader, we get access to it.
Yes, this is the psychological key that unlocks the entire deep dive. Dione is a reg survivor.
The text reveals she was married very briefly at 18 to a man named Scott, and it was a disaster. It heavily implies marital rape.
The trauma was so profound that it rewired her brain. She cannot tolerate the intimate touch of a man unless she is in a position of complete and total control.
Which explains her career choice perfectly.
It's the only way she can function. Think about the context of physical therapy. I am the expert. I tell you when to move. I initiate the contact. I am in charge. It provides a safe, clinical framework for human contact without the terrifying vulnerability of intimacy.
This brings us to what you called the safety paradox when we were prepping. She feels safe with Blake. Why?
Because he's paralyzed. It sounds twisted, but to Dione's traumatized subconscious, Blake is the perfect man. Because he cannot physically overpower her. He can't chase her. He can't hold her down. He is the only man in the world she could be truly close to, laugh with, touch, because in her mind, the threat of sexual violence has been physically removed.
That is it's heartbreaking. Her safety is contingent on his brokenness.
Correct. And that sets up the central tragic irony of the entire story. Her job is to fix him. But if she succeeds,
She loses her safe space.
she's building the one thing she fears most. If he regains his strength, his alpha status, he regains the physical capacity to be a threat. She is actively working every single day to destroy the only environment in which she feels secure.
Wow. Okay, let's move into segment 4, because this is where that paradox really starts to cause problems. This is the shift where we go from patient and therapist to something much more complicated. And it all starts, bizarrely enough, with a tickle fight.
It sounds so juvenile, but physiologically and psychologically, it's a massive breakthrough. They're having their arm wrestling rematch.
And she wins again, but just barely this time. You can see he's getting stronger.
He is. And Blake gets so frustrated that he tries to punch the control box on his wheelchair, but he overreaches and tumbles out onto the floor. And in the process, he grabs her and pulls her down with him.
They're just a tangle of limbs on the floor, and normally this would be a moment of pure rage and humiliation for him. But instead,
He discovers she's ticklish, and he starts tickling her. And in that moment, he laughs. The text makes a point of saying this is the first genuine, gut-deep laugh they have heard from him in 2 years.
why is that laugh so important?
Laughter breaks the cortisol cycle of stress and anger. It floods the brain with endorphins. It's a somatic release of tension. For that one moment, they aren't a patient and a therapist. They're not thinking about paralyzed legs or therapy protocols. They are just two people engaging in play, and play is absolutely essential for human bonding.
And of course, that's the exact moment Serena walks in and clutches her pearls.
Of course, the reality police arrive,
Yeah.
but it's too late. The damage, or rather the healing, is done. That clinical barrier has been shattered.
But this new intimacy immediately leads to a crisis, the impotence conversation.
This scene is so raw and so tough to read. Blake wakes up in the middle of the night with severe leg cramps. Dione comes in to massage them, and he just pushes her away. He's furious.
And he finally confesses his deepest fear. He tells her he feels like a sexless gelding.
That word choice, gelding, a castrated horse, is so specific. He believes that because he hasn't had any sexual response since the accident, he is permanently impotent. For a man whose entire identity was built on being the alpha, this is a fate far worse than being in a wheelchair. In his mind, he has ceased to be a man.
And Dione's first instinct is to retreat back into her professional shell. She starts quoting textbooks at him. You're only at 65% of your former strength. Nature will take care of it when the time is right.
She tries to be clinical, but he won't let her. He calls her out. He accuses her of hiding behind her professionalism, of being afraid of life, afraid of being a woman. And that hits a nerve.
Because he's right.
He's absolutely right, and she knows it. So this forces her hand. She comes up with a plan, a scheme. And honestly, from a modern medical ethics standpoint, this is a minefield.
It's completely unethical.
Completely. She decides that the only way to heal his psychological impotence is to try and seduce him, to prove to him that his body still works.
So this woman, who is terrified of male sexuality and intimacy due to her own trauma,
Decides to make herself into a sexual object as a form of therapy. It's an act of supreme, if misguided, self-sacrifice. She decides to prioritize his mental health and his ego over her own trauma triggers.
which leads to the shopping montage. Dione and Serena, who have now become unlikely allies, go to war.
They go shopping for an arsenal. The sourceless see-through nightgowns, skimpy bikinis for the pool therapy, dresses with thigh-high slits.
Serena becomes her sultry consultant. It's actually a really nice moment of female solidarity. They're conspiring together to bring this man's spirit back to life.
And the scheme works. Maybe a little too well.
How so?
Blake sees Dione in the hallway one night, backlit, in one of these sheer gowns, and the text says the dynamic shifts instantly. He stops looking at her like a nurse he depends on, starts looking at her like a man looks at a desirable woman, like a predator in the romantic sense.
He starts noticing her as a woman.
He comments on her legs, he tracks her movements around the room, the power dynamic flips, he becomes the pursuer. She's no longer just the therapist in control.
This leads us right into segment 5. Complications of the heart. Because it's not just Blake who's watching her now.
Right. Richard, the brother-in-law, the one who hired her, he starts sniffing around. He's a healthy, powerful, wealthy man, and he's clearly attracted to Dion's strength.
Which, of course, drives Serena crazy with jealousy. She's convinced they're having an affair behind her back.
But Dione, being the master strategist she is, uses this. She plays 4D chess.
How does she handle it?
She maintains very strict professional boundaries with Richard, but she uses Serena's jealousy to fix Serena's own marriage. She basically sits Serena down and tells her, stop mothering your brother and start seducing your husband. Your marriage is falling apart because all your energy is focused over here.
And it works. Serena refocuses her energy on Richard, they rekindle their marriage, and it effectively removed her as an obstacle from the main playing field.
It clears the way. Now it's just Blake and Dione, which inevitably leads to the first kiss.
And the setup for this is it's a moment of pure triumph. Blake stands on his own for the first time, using the parallel bars in the gym. He's vertical, under his own power, for the first time in over 2 years.
The emotion in that room must have been overwhelming. They were both just weeping with relief and joy. All that pain, all that work has led to this moment.
It's pure catharsis. And in that moment of shared victory, Blake leans in and kisses her.
And at first, she kisses him back. Because in that moment, she trusts him completely. It's a gentle kiss, it's emotional, it's safe. But then
Blake forgets he's a patient. The man takes over.
the kiss deepens. It becomes more demanding. It becomes passionate. It becomes male.
And Dione's brain just short-circuits.
Her PTSD kicks in hard. The source material describes it as feeling like she's falling into the black pit of her nightmares. Her body remembers the trauma even if her conscious mind wants the kiss. It's a physiological reaction she can't control.
She shoves him away. Violently.
She physically recoils from him as if he's burned her. And Blake, being Blake with his own massive insecurities, completely misunderstands her reaction.
He doesn't know her history. He has no context for this.
None. So he interprets it as personal rejection. He thinks, she pities me. I'm a pathetic cripple, and the second I try to be a man and show desire, she's repulsed by me. He retreats back into anger and shame.
It's just a classic tragic miscommunication, born from two people carrying these massive invisible suitcases full of trauma.
It is. And that tension just builds and builds as we go into segment 6, the triumph and the exit strategy. Because physically, Blake is now on a roll. He's crushing it.
He starts to get movement back in his toes, which is a huge neurological sign. He graduates to walking with a walker. He's regaining his autonomy day by day.
There's this incredible scene in the car on Thanksgiving Day. It's his first time leaving the house. Dione is driving him to Serena's for dinner. He's in the passenger seat. And he reaches over and starts fondling her leg while she's driving.
The notes describe him as being high on freedom and testosterone.
That's exactly it. It's an assertion of dominance. He's reclaiming his territory, his manhood. He's so high on his own recovery that he almost causes a car accident.
But for Dione, this is the final alarm bell.
It's the loudest one yet. He is no longer the safe, paralyzed patient. He is a powerful, physically strong, sexually aggressive male. The monster she was afraid of building is now sitting right next to her.
And to make matters worse, she realizes she's in love with him, which is the worst possible timing.
The absolute worst. Because in her mind, her utility is coming to an end. She has always viewed herself as a crutch.
You use a crutch when you're broken.
And when you can walk on your own, you throw the crutch away. She is convinced that once Blake is 100% recovered, he'll want a whole woman, not a damaged orphan with a sordid traumatic past.
So she plans her escape.
She does. She secretly contacts an agency and books a new, difficult case that starts in January. She decides she has to leave him before he can leave her. It is a preemptive strike on her own heart.
It's a classic defense mechanism, right? Abandonment issues 101.
If I leave first, then I can't be abandoned. I retain control.
The final confrontation is just brutal. Blake is excitedly talking about his plans to return to work, planning their future together, and Dione just drops the bomb. I won't be here. My contract is up in January.
Blake just flips out. He doesn't understand. He grabs her wrist, which is a huge trigger for her, by the way, and says, I still need you.
And Dione says something so profoundly sad in that moment. She says, I'm a habit. By the time I've been gone a month, you won't even think about me.
She's projecting her own deep-seated lack of self-worth onto him. And to protect herself further, she lies. She tells him she falls a little bit in love with all her patients, that this is just what she does, and she moves on. It's the only justification she can build to allow herself to walk away.
And the source material ends with this scene that should be a celebration, but for Dione, it feels like a wake.
It really does. Blake is walking along the parallel bars, totally unaided. They pop champagne. The whole staff and family are there laughing, celebrating. He thinks he's winning. He thinks he has it all back.
The legs, the future, the girl.
He has no idea that the woman standing right next to him, smiling, is mentally packing her bags and planning her escape route. We are left on this incredible precipice. He is physically recovered, but emotionally, they are both still dangling off that ledge he fell from 2 years ago.
Wow. So let's try to synthesize all of this. What's the final takeaway? What's the signal of this deep dive?
I think the core message, the thing that really resonates, is that the physical recovery was the easy part. Growing muscle, knitting bone, that's just biology and hard work. The emotional recovery is the real, unconquered mountain.
Dione calls herself a crutch, but she's so wrong.
She's fundamentally wrong. She didn't just fix his legs. She performed a complete reconstruction of his identity and his will to live.
And at the same time, he forced her to feel again. He broke through her armor just as surely as she broke through his apathy.
Exactly. You see this incredible dual transformation. Blake went from a man waiting to die to a man actively planning his future. And Dione went from a woman hiding from life behind a professional shield to a woman who is terrified of losing the one life she's found.
But she's stuck on what you called the equality question.
Right. Can a relationship that begins with such an extreme power imbalance, with such total dependency, ever truly transition into a partnership of equals?
Dione's answer is no.
Dione doesn't think it's possible. She believes the nurse-patient dynamic is baked in forever. The rest of the story, which we aren't covering today, is essentially Blake having to prove to her that he wants the woman, not the nurse who saved him.
That is a really powerful takeaway. It makes you look at relationships in your own life and ask that question right. How much is based on need versus want? And what happens to the bond when the need disappears?
A provocative thought to end on.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Come Lie With Me. It's a story about building muscle, sure, but mostly it's about the muscle of the human heart.
Well said.
We'll see you next time.